Good evening, everybody. You're very welcome to this information session. My name is Deirdre Moynihan. I'm the head of programs at Music Network, and I'm looking forward to sharing some key information with you about the Music Capital Scheme Piano Award over the next little while. It's a brand new award which was introduced in the most recent round of the scheme. It was launched at the end of 2024 and it's currently open for applications. Just to say that this session is being recorded and will be available afterwards on Music Network's social channels. So do spread the word if anyone has missed this session here this evening that you think may be interested to apply or to find out more about the award. So the format for this evening's session is I'm going to talk about the application process, the assessment process, conditions of the award, and share some hopefully helpful information and useful tips with you along the way. Now, we have received quite a number of inquiries about the Piano Award so far. Some of these have been very general and some have been quite specific to a particular organization's setup and situation. So we feel the most productive way to answer queries in this session is I'm going to cover some of the general questions that have come in as I talk through the session. And should you have additional questions afterwards, we invite you to contact us by email or by phone, and we'll certainly do our best to answer questions that are very specific and maybe tailored to your organization. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. I'm just going to share my screen if you bear with me for 1 second. Okay. Hopefully you can all see that now. So this is the Music Capital Scheme online information session for the 2024 Piano Award. The scheme itself is managed by Music Network and it's funded by the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sport and Media. Here we go. So what essentially is the Music Capital Scheme Piano Award? It provides support for the purchase and refurbishment of concert standard grand pianos. It's open to arts venues and music presenters programming in a dedicated performance space to apply to. And you can submit an application in partnership with a local authority. And in the event of that, the organisation, the arts venue or the music presenter would still be the main applicant. Now, who can apply? So of the organisations that we've just mentioned, it would be these organisations that provide a year-round high-quality music programme promoting excellence in music performance, those that support the work of professional musicians, and of course there's many ways in which one can support the work of professional musicians outside of the performance platform, through artist residencies, masterclasses, as I said, many ways. So just to mention that that's what that is referring to. And also organizations who have a strong track record in audience and community engagement. So what funding is available this year? The total funding for this round of the Piano Award is 180,000. Now, grand pianos may be either new or secondhand. Applicants may apply for up to 75% of the purchase cost or up to 70% of the refurbishment cost. And just to mention as well, if the refurbishment cost is 15,000 or less, the percentage will reduce from 70 to 50%. Now, I just wanted to cover a number of questions which came in via phone and email prior to this session that relate to what we've covered here on this slide. So the first query we would have received was, could an applicant apply for a digital piano or an upright piano? And the answer is that for this scheme, it is open for applications related to grand pianos only. Another question that came in was, is there an upper limit in terms of the amount of funding that an applicant can apply for? And the answer is that there is no upper limit as such, but just to be mindful and to ensure that what you're, I suppose, applying for really aligns with the needs of your music program, and it makes sense with your future plans and, you know, the feasibility of your organization to deliver on those plans. A third question that came in related to a query where the applicant was saying they would be interested in sourcing a second-hand piano, but that piano would be in need of some refurbishment in order to bring it to performance standard. And so the query was, can you apply for support for both the purchase of the second-hand piano and the subsequent refurbishment that would be required to bring it to performance standard? And the answer there is yes. So you could apply for 75% of the purchase cost of that instrument and then 70% of the refurbishment cost. And the final question I just wanted to mention in relation to this slide was, if it's only very minor repair work or tuning only, that would not be eligible under this particular scheme. Now, Music Network is committed to equity and inclusion and welcomes applications from arts venues and music presenters within culturally diverse communities. We encourage applicants with disabilities or access requirements who wish to submit an application on behalf of their venue or organisation to make contact with us as early as possible so that every effort can be made to provide reasonable accommodation and to support you as you submit your application. So applicants must be based in the Republic of Ireland. They must not currently have a concert standard grand piano in performance condition in situ. And just one question that came in relation to this point, we were asked a venue that had a piano in situ which had been used previously for performance. And I suppose it was coming to the end of life of that particular piano, and they were being advised that to refurbish that piano was not really a viable option to bring it back to performance standard, and they would be better to replace that piano with a different instrument. So I suppose the question was, would they be entitled to apply to purchase a new or second-hand instrument, even though they currently have a grand piano in situ? And the answer there would be that yes, they would be eligible because that piano is not in performance condition, and refurbishment is not a viable option to bring it to performance condition. Applicants or organisations must be managed at a professional level and uphold best practice in relation to their governance and operations. And then they must demonstrate that they provide all of the following. And I've spoken about those 4 points already, so I won't go through them again, but just be mindful that your organisation must demonstrate that you can provide all of the following. So moving on to the application process itself. It's a two-stage process. The first is an online process and the second is an online interview process. So stage one, you'll be asked to submit an application form via Music Network's website, and you're asked to submit this by 2 p.m. on Wednesday, the 19th of February, 2025. Stage two then relates to online interviews. So shortlisted applicants will be notified by the 6th of March, 2025. And just some reasons as to why your application may be deemed ineligible. Late applications cannot be accepted after the deadline. So just to be really mindful of that deadline, which we've included again there, anything or any attempts, I suppose, to submit after the deadline, it won't be feasible and your application will be ineligible. If your application is missing requested information or materials, it may be deemed ineligible, or of course, if it does not comply with the award conditions. So moving on to the application process itself. Stage one. So first of all, if you visit Music Network's website and you have the full address there, you can browse to the What's On section and you will see a dedicated page there, or a link to a dedicated page for the Music Capital Scheme Piano Award. From there, you can download the Music Capital Scheme 2024 Piano Award Guidelines. And of course, we encourage you to read those carefully. It's very simple then to set up an account on the application portal, and we use the platform Submittable. You may have used this as well yourself in the past. for other application processes. And, it's very user-friendly, very straightforward, very simple to register and set up your account. Once you're set up, you can start to complete your application form in stages, including uploading materials. So everything is done through this platform, and you can save copies of your application as many times as you like and come back to it. And then when you're ready, submit your application. You have the deadline again there. When you submit your application, you should receive an automated confirmation email almost straight away, having submitted the application. If you don't receive that in the inbox of your email account, do check your spam folder. And if it's not in either folder, please get in touch with us straight away, because without that confirmation email, it means that we have not received your application. Maybe a technical glitch that you may not be aware of, for example, and we also won't be aware of it because it means we haven't received your application. So do get in touch if that happens, and we will do our very best to help resolve whatever the issue is. I would suggest you submit, if you can, prior to the 19th of February, as obviously the more time we have to help resolve any issue with you, the better, to avoid any disappointment on the day. Now, for stage one, all applicants will be notified about the results of stage one by the 6th of March. And for those applicants who have been shortlisted and are invited to proceed to stage two, they will be invited to attend an online interview to discuss the application. And this is a real opportunity to elaborate on the plans you've outlined in your online application form. Now, you may be asked to submit additional materials in support of your application. This might be prior to this interview, or it might be after that interview as well. And second interviews may also be held if required. So I thought it might be useful to just briefly go through the application form to give you an overview as to what information has been asked for. Section 1 is very straightforward. It's just general information, contact information for the primary and secondary contact in your organisation. Questions like where the venue is located, where the dedicated performance space is located, if that's different from your offices. It's very straightforward, section 1. Section 2 is where you outline your organisation's structure and governance. You'll be asked how your organisation is funded and what public funding you have received in the last number of years. It's also where you detail the nature of any partnership you may have with a local authority. You'll be asked if you have a piano in situ, and if so, to outline the make and model condition of that instrument. Of course, that would be relevant for your application if you do have an instrument already in situ. And in section 2, you're also asked to confirm that your organisation upholds best practice in relation to your governance and operations, and also that you have a bank account in the name of the organisation, and that tax clearance details in the name of the organisation are available should they be required. Moving on to section 3, which relates to your organisation's activities. You're asked, first of all, to provide a short history of the organisation, and you'll be asked to outline the range of musical activities that you offer or you present, and to talk about the audience levels, the engagement with the community, activities across all genres, for example. So you're asked to provide an overview of the music programme for the past 2 years, and there's an opportunity to upload some supporting documentation if there are any elements of your programme that you'd like to highlight, for example. And then you're also asked to upload an overview of the music programme for the next 2 years, so to outline your plans for the future in relation to your programming. Section 4 relates to the proposed purchase or refurbishment, and when you begin that section, there'll be a branch for purchase of an instrument and a branch for refurbishment of an instrument. And as I mentioned earlier, should you be in a scenario where you might be intending to purchase a second-hand instrument, which might also be in need of some refurbishment, in the event of that being the case, you would choose the purchase option on the form, and you'll have an opportunity to elaborate about any refurbishment plans as you progress through that strand of the form. In section 4, you're asked to outline your plans for sourcing an instrument the expected cost of the instrument and how your contribution will be funded. Now, you're not necessarily asked to have found the specific instrument at this point, but you do need to outline your plans, clear plan in place for how you would go about sourcing an instrument. There's also a section in section 4 where you outline the impact having an instrument in situ would have on your future programming plans. And that's a really, what should we say, a good opportunity to make your case for funding and to kind of make a really strong case as to the positive impact of having this instrument in situ in your venue or dedicated performance space. And finally, in section 4, you're asked to elaborate on the housing conditions, so the conditions under which the piano will be homed or kept in the future, and also your plans for maintenance. So regular maintenance plans are crucial. And finally, section 5 is an optional section where you can offer feedback to Music Network on the scheme, and it will of course have no bearing on your application itself, but we welcome all feedback and appreciate any information you'd like to share with us there. And finally, at the end of the form, of course, you have the acceptance of terms of use, and you click submit when you're happy with your application form. Now, this is just some very straightforward examples. I'm sure you've come across this all of the time, very easy to input information, through radio buttons, typical text boxes. There'll be word count limits at the bottom right-hand corner of these, so keep an eye on those. You'll see there's some grayed out writing there under 2.2, so there are try and include some helpful tips and information under various questions as you go through the form, so keep an eye on those. They can be helpful just as a guide as you go through the application form. 3.4 is a simple explanation of how, or example, sorry, of how you can upload files. You'll just be selecting the file, browsing to it on your desktop or wherever you have it saved, and upload it. Again, you have the grayed out writing underneath, and useful information like what type of file types you can upload, the number of files you've already uploaded. If you're saving multiple drafts, it can all be handy information as you navigate the form. And you'll see there at the very end, just when you browse down to the end of the form, you can save the draft, as I said, as many times as you like, and only when you're completely happy, you can click apply, and at that point you should receive that confirmation email. So moving on to the assessment procedure, I just wanted to highlight the selection criteria, as these criteria are, I suppose, the basis on which the panel will assess all applications. So it's really important that you keep all 4 in mind, of course. And that would be track record in music programming and audience engagement, future programming plans, including concert programs, support of professional musicians and audience community engagement, demonstrated need for support from this scheme. So why should your application be supported? And finally, the feasibility of proposal. And we received a number of queries relating to that final point there, the feasibility of proposal and what would be taken into consideration in terms of feasibility. So, it would be important to demonstrate an ability to deliver on future programming plans that you have outlined. Are they realistic? Can you demonstrate they can be delivered? To demonstrate that you have an ability to source the funding required, so the funding for your contribution to the purchase or refurbishment. And finally, an ability to demonstrate the housing and care and ongoing maintenance of the piano, that will all be feasible for your organization to manage the plans and to deliver and to make sure that piano is safely housed and well maintained as you move forward. Now, finally, just wanted to talk about the conditions of the award, and we've summarized the points here that are the conditions of the award, which are outlined in more detail in the guidelines. And just to go through these and just mention a couple of things relating to the conditions. So awardees must fund a minimum of 25% of the purchase cost or 30 to 50% of the refurbishment cost. So just to mention that should you receive a discount from a supplier, in the event that you are lucky and receive a discount, that discount must be deducted before any of those percentages are calculated. So for example, if you were to receive a 10% discount from a supplier, you would deduct that 10% and then calculate, for example, the 25% or the 30%, depending on whether you were purchasing or refurbishing an instrument. Awardees must abide by public procurement guidelines when sourcing a piano or refurbishment service. And so I'm sure you'll be familiar with public procurement guidelines. And so depending on the total cost of, for example, the piano purchase, so not the percentage that you're applying for, but the actual total cost of the instrument, depending on that cost, you may fall into a particular category, whether that would be that you would be required then to submit 3 quotations from separate suppliers, or perhaps to undertake an e-tender process in order to adhere to public procurement guidelines. It's important to be aware of what category you would fall into, as you would be required to submit, I suppose, proof of the fact that you're adhering with public procurement guidelines before any drawdown would be made as an awardee. Awardees must also provide bank account details in the name of the organisation in order to draw down the award, and tax clearance details may also be required. So we mentioned that in section 2 of the form. And so tax clearance details would be required in the event of an award of 10,000 or more being awarded. Awardees are asked to provide a copy of related receipts for the purchase or refurbishment within 6 months of the award drawdown. And if the receipts were not received by Music Network, the award would have to be refunded. Or, for example, if the final cost, so the receipts for the final cost, were less than the actual expected cost, the surplus amount would be refunded to Music Network, and this would be added to the Music Capital Scheme Fund for subsequent rounds of the scheme. Awardees will be asked to sign a declaration form, which will include confirming that you accept all award conditions and that your organisation will uphold best practice in relation to governance and operations. And just to say that that declaration form will you'll be asked to have that signed by 2 members of your organisation, for example, your CEO and your treasurer, for example. So moving on then to another condition of the award is that the organisations operate a clear policy for use of the piano, including making adequate provision for its housing, insurance, care, maintenance and repair. Now, these plans are really crucial, that you have a very comprehensive plan in place and that you articulate this in your application in section 4 in terms of housing the piano, so suitable conditions that it will be housed in, and also that you have plans for appropriate maintenance plans, which should include annual consultation with a suitably qualified instrumental technician, for example, that there are plans in place to tune the instrument prior to each performance. So yeah, these plans are really important to have those outlined and to show that you can deliver on these plans as you move forward if you're successful in the award. You're asked as a condition of the award to acknowledge the support of Music Network and the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sport and Media in publicity material for the lifetime of the piano. And this, the relevant logos and appropriate acknowledgement text will be shared with all awardees. You're asked to provide annual reports on the use of the instrument for a period of 5 years. And so this would be where you would outline the activities and, music program of each year as you progress through the 5-year stage. And you would also be asked to submit examples of how and where the acknowledgement of Music Network and the department was included in various materials. Awardees are asked to accommodate, or potential awardees, Music Network site visits during the assessment process and or subsequent to an award being made. Of course, any visit would be discussed and agreed in advance with any organisation. Just mentioning that there as condition of the award. And then finally, 2 more conditions. Awardees are not to sell or otherwise dispose of the instrument funded under this scheme. Now, that might arise, for example, if your organisation ceased to exist. In that instance, the organisation would contact Music Network, and together we would decide on what the appropriate way forward would be, whether that would be to transfer the instrument to another organisation, or perhaps the decision would be made to sell that instrument and then the appropriate percentage returned to Music Network, which would again be added to the fund for subsequent rounds of the Muse Capital Scheme. And finally, of course, all awardees would agree to be bound by the conditions of the award. So we've come to the end of the information session. I hope you have found that to be useful. As I said, we were covering general queries throughout the session, but you may have more specific queries particular to your organization setup or situation. So please do contact us directly by email or by phone with any questions you may have. The email to contact is operations@musicnetwork.ie, or you can phone us on 014750224, and we do hope to hear from you. Again, just one final reminder of the deadline, 2 p.m. on the 19th of February, and there as well you have our web address to browse to start your application. So I hope you found the session useful. I think it just remains for me to wish you the very best of luck as you put together your application, and yeah, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.